Good morning, Leader.
Good morning. Could somebody please mute their microphone, because there's obviously building work going on somewhere in the background. Good morning. My name is Councillor Martin Hill, leader of Lincolnshire County Council. Welcome to this October's meeting of the County Council Executive. I'll now hand over to Cheryl, who will just do some of the housekeeping for us, please. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you, Leader. Please can councillors confirm they are present when their name is called. Councillor Mrs Bradwell.
Present.
Councillor Davey.
Present.
Councillor Davis.
Present.
Councillor Mrs Woolley.
Present.
Councillor Worth.
Present.
Councillor Young.
Present.
Councillor Parker.
Present.
And Councillor Pepper.
Present.
Leader, the following officers are also in attendance: Les Britson, Chief Fire Officer; David Coleman, Chief Legal Officer; Andrew Crookham, Executive Director for Resources; James Drury, Executive Director for Commercial; Glenn Garrett, Executive Director for Adult Care and Community Wellbeing; Andy Gutherson, Executive Director for Place; Heather Sandy, Executive Director for Children's Services; and Nigel West, Head of Democratic Services. We've received apologies for absence from Councillor Poll and Debbie Barnes, Chief Executive. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. Thank you for that. So unless there are any further apologies, I will move on to item 2 then, which is any declarations of interest. So would anybody wishing to declare either raise their hand, or I'll move on. Okay, there are no declarations have been given, so we'll move on then to item 3, which is announcements by myself or other executive members or directors. I have Colin Davey, please. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Leader. Just wanted to quickly update the Executive Board on the Tourism Commission for Greater Lincolnshire and Rutland. A new meeting. We've had our first meeting last week, and I firstly want to thank all the private sector members of the Commission who have given up their time to be part of this piece of work. The Commission is going to meet 6 times between now and February. We'll be producing a report in February, which will hopefully set the scene and the shape of the visitor economy sector for Greater Lincolnshire and Rutland for the years ahead. It is very important that we have a single message about the quality of our offer and the visitor economy generally. That is a necessity as we go forward to bid for a tourism sector deal and tourism zone status, which is how we will then trigger additional finances for the sector from government. I'm very ambitious for this sector. I think that it is an area of potential growth for the whole area. And we do, as we all know, have a wonderful offer from our fantastic historic cities and towns to our open countryside and an amazing coastline. So we have got really great foundations to work with. We've got a great bunch of people around the table who I'm sure are going to come up with the right conclusions in how we shape this sector going forward, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. Councillor Bradwell.
Chairman, I haven't got. I didn't
You're
want
away.
To...
You're away. No, you've just muted yourself again.
No, I was just saying, Chairman, I wasn't going to make an announcement. Sorry.
Okay, just put your hand down then, please. That'd be great. In terms of the 2 announcements I've got to make, one is about the Devolution Agenda. As yet, we've Lincolnshire, or indeed any other area of the country, have yet to hear anything formally from the government. So we still wait in a bit in limbo land regarding that, although it would seem increasingly unlikely that Lincolnshire is probably going to be in the first wave of devolution deals, if indeed there are any devolution deals this year. So there's no certainty still about when the government's white paper on devolution is also going to be coming forward. So in the meantime, continue to work closely with partners in Greater Lincolnshire, pushing the Greater Lincolnshire agenda, such as you've heard from Councillor David just now in terms of tourism and other economic benefits, to make sure that whatever comes in the future, Greater Lincolnshire is at the forefront of plans and will be there to drive the agenda for the county, the greater county area. The other item is just on coronavirus. In terms of that, the rates are rising in Lincolnshire pretty much in line with national rates. So that does mean we do start from a low base. So at present, things seem to be okay, and partners are actually working well together to make sure we deal with any isolated outbreaks, but indeed, if there are any other issues, in particular, if and when there is a vaccine made available, how in Lincolnshire we will be able to support the rollout of said vaccine. So unless anybody else has got any other items they wish to announce, I will move on. Okay, thank you very much.
Very quickly, Martin, if I may.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Davies. Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, nothing dramatic. Just to report that colleagues may be pleased to hear that Lincolnshire County Council were recently declared the overall winner of this year's Patrol Parking Annual Report. I appreciate parking enforcement and traffic wardens aren't always the most popular aspects of what we do, but I think it's good that we've been recognised as the best performing authority in the annual awards. And it very much reflects the fact that despite the difficulties associated with it as a service, it is key for keeping our towns and the city moving that we have an efficient parking enforcement service. And we've actually been recognised by the House of Commons Transport Select Committee as such as well. So it's I thought that was a bit of good news to pass back.
Thank you. That's very good to know. Good. Yes, that's excellent news, especially if you're those of us who are trying to go through congested town centres. Thank you. I'll now move on to item 4 then, which is the minutes of this executive, which was held on the 2nd of September. Are you all, is anybody not content that I sign these as a true and accurate record? I'll do it that way around. So I'll just pause for a moment. Councillor Davies could put his hand down, please, unless you are going to challenge the minutes. Is all right. You're not brilliant. Thank you very much. So without any indication that there is an issue, I'll take it as unanimously agreed that the minutes are a true and accurate record. Thank you for that. On to item 5 then, which is the payment arrangements for residential care. And I'll hand over now to Councillor Bradwell. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we've got a report in front of us today, which outlines the Ombudsman report that we received in 2018 and we discussed last year, and actually talks also about payment improvements that we've made within IT. When this Ombudsman report first came in, we couldn't make any changes to the way we collected monies or paid monies out because of how our finances were collected. Our IT has dramatically improved, so we are able to bring this paper now to the executive today to discuss whether we should change the way payments are made to nursing homes and the top up that our residents sometimes need to make from families. So I'll hand over to Glenn, and I don't know whether Pam's here today, our finance officer, to go through the paper. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I am. Morning, Councillor Bradwell, and morning, everybody.
Sorry,
so thank you, Glenn. Thank you, Glenn. You're in next, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to defer to Pam, who'll present the paper and then support with any questions should the executive want to ask anything.
Thank you. Over to you then, Pam.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. The paper in front of you recommends a change from our existing, what we call a net payment arrangement for residential care, to a gross payment arrangement with an appropriate mobilisation period. Historically, there are two financial flows that go into a residential provider. The council pays the provider the assessed contribution on the council's behalf, and then the residential provider collects the service user contribution directly from them. Where a provider has been unsuccessful for whatever reason in collecting that service user contribution, the council will pay the full amount. And that's because legally it is the council's responsibility to pay the full cost of a person's care, including any top-up fees. Under a gross payment arrangement, the council would pay the residential provider in full and then recover the service user contributions from the service user. So there's a bit of a swap around in responsibilities, and that's detailed on page 11. From page 13 onwards, you can see that the paper incorporates a table which compares the changes Councillor Bradwell alluded to since the previous decision to continue to pay MET was made. And I'd like to highlight three key improvements. The first is the fact that we have delivered a brilliant reduction in the time taken to complete an individual's financial assessment. So the understanding of who pays what amount of contribution is now a lot clearer sooner. This was a 17-week process, and we now see the majority completed within 4 to 6 weeks, which is a phenomenal change for adult social care. The second improvement I'd like to highlight since the paper was last discussed is the recurrent financial implications of moving to a gross system, and they have reduced from £601,000 per year to a maximum of £273,000 per year. And that's as a result of the system efficiencies, which I'll come on to in a minute, that's already been delivered. There is a potential to reduce this cost even further as we introduce further automation and efficiencies highlighted throughout the paper. The third element of improvement, again alluded to by Councillor Bradwell, is the systems development programme, which is underway. And that programme will see 4 of our currently separate systems come together into 3 systems which interact. And ultimately that will bring together what we call our case assessment and management system, you might know it as Mosaic, and our financial assessment system together. And page 13 of the report shows the delivery of that to date. That programme of integration is and will continue to increase automation in our processes, and it will provide a platform for us on which we can build some of our more strategic initiatives like our online assessments that are due to come online in the next 12 months. The benefits of moving to a gross payment arrangement are detailed on page 10 of the report. From a service user's perspective, during what can be quite a daunting time for them, they are beginning to see a seamless approach which is delivered in a far shorter space of time. And also changing to a gross payment arrangement would remove any risk of financial pressure being placed on them by providers who are currently charged with the task of collecting the contributions on our behalf. From a residential provider's perspective, they will receive one flow of funds for an individual's care rather than the current 2, and would no longer need to navigate the differing routes when queries and/or non-payment arises. Early indications from the market are suggesting such a move would be welcomed in what is an extremely challenging environment for our adult social care providers, particularly currently. From the council's point of view, we would have consistency across adult care services, reducing confusion arising from different payment arrangements currently on operation. Those are detailed on page 10. And we would gain further efficiencies in process, again detailed on page 10, through the removal of the additional steps in process we have now through running various systems. We do, however, need to continue to deliver improvements in our debt collection process. That is underway. We have a debt review programme in place, which is reviewing all adult social care debt by customer. This is reviewing why the debt is outstanding, but also introducing new ways of working, which will speed up debt collection. And again, an example of that is on page 14. Adult social care in any council will carry high levels of debt due to its nature. However, the aim of the review is to recover the debt in a far shorter period of time. And it is envisaged to take us through to the end of March to tidy up our current debt process and implement all of those new processes in line with some of our system changes. I think those are the key points contained in the paper which I wanted to pull out. So any questions?
Thank you, Pam. Before we go to questions, then, Councillor Parker, is scrutiny comments? I presume you are dealing with those.
Yes, thank you. I am providing the scrutiny report. I was asked last night to do it because I think Councillor Marfleet isn't available. I've had the opportunity of reading the draft minutes of the scrutiny committee meeting on the 1st of September, and a couple of things were clear. The presentation that was given by Pam and Helen Glover at that meeting was detailed, and the committee were advised on the reasons for the recommendation. I think it's also fair to point out just simply that the conclusion of the committee was to give support to the change to gross payments and supported the recommendations. That there was not, it seemed, any scrutiny in that sense. The support was given, though.
Thank you, Councillor Bradwell. Were you at the scrutiny? Did you attend the scrutiny meeting?
Yes, I did, Mr. Chairman. There were a number of questions asked by members of the committee, but they did vote in favour of the report and could see the benefits for the residents and could see the benefits that's been made within our financial collection over the last year. So no, they were happy that we go ahead and change the way we collect money. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So questions then, please, members of the executive. I suppose in terms of obviously the responsibility for sort of collecting the debt, if you like, which would seem to be now we've got seem to be better now we've got our sort of systems in a better place. So what's your estimation, Pam, of how this sort of where there's non-payment issues arise? Will that improve the situation or not?
No, thank you, Councillor Hill. They're just replacing my window that had a bit of an accident last night, so I will apologise for the noise in the background. From the debt collection perspective, our debt levels at the moment have been quite high, but the processes that we've put in place, working with our area team managers on a monthly basis, have ensured that we now know where all of our outstanding debt is, and each debt has an allocated person for resolving that debt. And we've learned from those systems, we've learned from that review to build it in going forward as we build the new Hoople system. We've built the lessons learned into that business process, and that is why in my comments through to March 2021, which is our current Hoople build time.
Thank you. So just walk us through the process. Presumably, when we do the assessment, etc., then we do the financial assessments. These are all hopefully taken automated from clients mostly. Is that the case?
Well, what there will be two systems. So Abacus will always be at the moment. There isn't anything else on the market to do the financial assessment, but we have built now with our Looking Local providers an initial online assessment, which gives the service user, while they're sat with one of our workers, the ability to understand that they will be in need of paying care. And we need to get that message across when they've got people with them, so they understand that and they know that that liability is coming. That's being strengthened. We have a training programme that is due to go live between January to March on the intricacies that are adult social care charging, so that we have people who are in regular contact with our service users, the understanding of what the charges are and what they mean. We have reviewed, and I think it came to April exec, our charging policy. So we've made all of our charging now clear. All of it is in line with the Care Act, and it's consistent again across all of our areas. So we've removed any of those sort of complexities and barriers that service users were feeding back to us. Then, should we have any challenges with non-payment, we have some clear guidance aligned to Annex D of the Care Act in the processes that we go through, which includes face-to-face discussions with the service user. Where they don't come to be, it will all be documented, but where we do end up in a process, we do still have the right to go down a legal route, but that should be the last resort.
In terms of mostly by direct debit or standing order, is it how do they pay? Presumably they can pay how they like, but better if it's just done automated. Most
Yeah.
people do that.
Yes, we have about 70% on direct debit or the all pay cards, which people still use and prefer to use going in through post offices, etc. Very few are now on invoices based, 20 to 25%.
And hopefully we're trying to reduce that, are we? Because it would make life easier for everybody.
We are, absolutely. Again, that's now on the automated process, automated options. We've got the online payments. It's all detailed on the information we give to service users at the beginning of their care.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Woolley, please.
Thank you, Leader. And you probably just hit on all the questions I was going to ask. And
I do apologise.
Yes, I'll have words later. What I really wanted to be assured of was that the third-party top-ups, we're not going to be in a situation where we've got a service user, but their partner is topping up, if you like, but is unaware. I think you probably answered it in that if it's the mechanism is through a standing order or a direct debit, that money will be coming out of somebody's account who actually knows where it's going and what it's for, rather than receiving an invoice sort of 4 weeks later. And presumably that negates, in the sad circumstances of where someone dies, that we don't then continue to take or invoice for, because the direct debit or standing order would then stop straight away. Can you reassure me of that?
That's absolutely right, Councillor Woolley. Your understanding is correct. And in addition to that, what we now have is a register of every third-party top-up paid within Lincolnshire, whether it's paid by the council or by the service user directly. We've compared that with the service users themselves and the provider homes. We did that as a result of COVID, but actually linked it to the gross versus net, so that we understand at any one point in time any potential additional financial pressure either placed on the council or the service user. And that register is kept up to date between service users, providers and the council on a monthly basis, between financial strategy and the commercial teams, working with the heads of service.
Okay, thank you for that.
And just to clarify on obviously the increased costs from Serco in this case, I mean, obviously, is that a long-standing? Because obviously if this works better, why is there an increased cost, I suppose, is the question.
It is a good question, Councillor Hill. That is the Serco cost, but when we look at how the systems will change going forward, my view is that cost will significantly reduce in three ways. One, further automation of the processes will mean Serco will no longer need the temporary staff they've got in there for manual residential invoices. Secondly, we are able to combine the way we work more across finance, commercial and Serco with some of these, just like we did for financial assessments, which ended up without additional cost. And thirdly, I think because we're joining together all of our systems and processes, actually we can link them through the system efficiencies and the debt coming down. So overall, financially, the benefits which aren't yet included in the paper will far outweigh any additional costs that we would need.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to contribute? Glenn, have you got anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank colleagues both in finance, my operational teams, legal and Serco for working really hard on this over the last 18 months with Councillor Bradwell's oversight and support. In many respects, we are in a far better place today than we have been going back over 10 years, from a paper-based, very cumbersome system that wasn't terribly friendly to anyone, which is now much, much slicker, much more online, and with the hope of more to come. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Very good then. So I'll now move to the vote. There are 4 recommendations, which basically are to note and receive, agree the move from a net to a gross basis for paying residential homes, and then delegate some of the details to Glenn Garrett in consultation with Councillor Bradwell in this instance. So if anybody is not a voting member, can they please shut down their, close down their video, and we'll have a vote. So at the moment, I can only see 3. So is everybody, all those in favour of the recommendations, please now show by raising their hand. Thank you. Is anybody against? No. And I think there are abstentions, so that has been carried. Okay, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you, Pam, for that.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, we move then on to the next paper, which is the Integrated Risk Management Plan 2020 to 24. So, Councillor Worth.
Thank you, Leader. There's two key documents here, the Community Risk Profile and the Community Plan. The Community Risk Profile is a very detailed data and performance-driven risk assessment which mitigates the risks and targets our resources to where they're most needed. That in itself links to the Community Plan, which is known as the Integrated Risk Management Plan. That's a statutory requirement. The Community Plan is deliberately quite graphical in the way it's laid out, so that it's very easy to understand for members of the public, so there's no kind of what I call fire jargon in there. Just probably like to say, on the back of comments from HMI last year, congratulations to the team for bringing such a detailed risk assessment here, because they really are putting a lot of work to make sure that the risks are mitigated and that we target our resources to where the greatest risks are. So without any further ado, I'll hand this over to Les Britson, Chief Fire Officer.
Thank you, Les.
Thank you, Councillor Worth. Good morning, Leader and members of the Executive.
Morning.
We've got a large number of documents here, so I don't intend to go through it line by line, but what I will do is skip through the report fairly briefly and leave as much time as possible for questions, if that's okay.
Yes.
So moving on to the paper, obviously the key recommendations really are that the Executive approve the Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue IRMP to cover the period 2024, and it forms part of the suite of documents which involves the Community Risk Profile, the Integrated Risk Management Plan, and the 5 associated frameworks, which in effect are like strategies that go with it. As Councillor Worth said, there's been a lot of work involved in this, and I'd firstly like to introduce Tim Joyce, who's on the line at the moment to support me. Tim is the Area Manager for Improvement, but I'd also like to thank both Matt King and Ben Ilsley, who can't be here today, who have been very instrumental in driving this project forward in detail, and they've done a great deal of work. As well as redesigning the plan and involving the community in the engagement, they've actually made it, as Councillor Worth said, a lot more engaging as a document. Previous documents were very wordy, very jargonistic, as was said, but we've done a lot of work with the engagement team and the County Council to make sure these are much more accessible and interesting and readable for the public. So just going through the main report. So the reasons for recommendations is the Integrated Risk Management Plan is a statutory document. All fire and rescue services must have one, and it forms part of the national framework in the UK, in England, sorry. Due to the effects of the pandemic, the publication has been extended. That's one of our proposals. Normally it'd be 3 years. It must be a minimum of 3 years, the Integrated Risk Management Plan, but we're proposing, due to various delays, that this is extended by an extra year. What we will also do is do an annual review of the risks in April each year. As I said, significant work has been undertaken to modernise the approach to risk profiling, not just internally, but also we've been working very closely with the National Fire Chiefs Council and the Chief of West Midlands Fire and Rescue Service in terms of looking at a new way of articulating community risk. And a lot of that work has been incorporated in the new document that you'll see today. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we have a suite of documents. So in effect, the Integrated Risk Management Plan is a suite which involves the Community Risk Profile, which is by far the most detailed risk as part of the suite. The Risk Management Plan is a shorter document which just articulates these in a simple way and outlines the supporting frameworks in a single page for people, response, prevention and protection, resourcing and evaluation. We have supporting frameworks which are much more detailed, but we haven't included those in the integrated risk management plan, but they are attached to the suite of documents that you've got. So moving on to page 33, the diagram you see there in section 1.5, in effect, I'm not going to go into detail, but in effect that is the process for bringing together all those risks and how we've actually arrived at the various documents in the community risk profile. So it's quite an integrated suite of processes, procedures, documents and analysis. Just wanted to make clear that we have gone through quite a lot of work with the community risk profile. Following previous Her Majesty's Inspector at Constabulary, HMIC, feedback on the last RMP, we wanted to do a lot more engagement with the community. So we did quite an extensive consultation, got about 170 odd responses, and that's helped articulate our risk profile. That included partners as well, representative bodies, staff, and so on. As I said, we've also taken on board the HMIC comments as well as the National Fire Chief's best practice, which is currently developing. So it's a work in progress, and we might see reviews of this in following years actually taking on slightly different format as well, so taking on the best practice from the National Fire Chiefs Council. We also took the opportunity because we had a chap called Ben Ilsley, who used to be a HMIC inspector, we thought we'd take the opportunity to have a critical HMIC stance viewpoint of our previous RMP and also our new RMP. So we've actually had someone who's from the inside of HMIC. He's now come to join us to work for us, and he's actually looked at the plan in detail and given us pointers how to strengthen it. As well as that, obviously COVID created delays. The Home Office did write to all chiefs in April and said if integrated risk management plans are due in April, then we would rather people focus on response to COVID rather than developing the plan. So we took that opportunity to have that extra time to do some further work on the frameworks, do some further development following the consultation. And actually, I think we've got a much stronger suite of documents moving forward. So what that has resulted in is a delay overall for various reasons, valid reasons, into October. So hence the proposal to extend the RMP by an extra year to 2024, which means what we are currently doing is operating under our 2016-2020 RMP until this RMP is formally approved. Hopefully that will be today. Just at the bottom of page 35, just briefly, there's a diagram there, and that shows how our various improvement pillars and these suite of documents, how it all fits together. The three documents in the middle, the three pillars in the middle, effective, efficient and people focused, are the three pillars of the HMIC inspection. In the middle, we've got culture, which is based on our Thrive initiative. And around it, you see where the frameworks and the RMP, the community risk profile fit in. So that's the gist of the report. What I'll do now is I'll move on to the quick run through the community risk profile. So that starts on page 43 of the pack. What we've done here, I think it's worthwhile pointing out that the risks in Lincolnshire, having gone through them, have not changed dramatically. We have added a couple of risks, but we've also articulated existing risks in a bit more detail and a bit more nuance based on things that have happened recently. So I'll run through those briefly. So if you go to page, sorry, I'm scrolling through. Page 21 of the community risk profile, it outlines just a table there. It's got the community risks with a risk rating. Just running through those: dwelling fires, road traffic collisions, health and well-being, which we can cover a bit more detail later, being a development of existing themes. That's really not to do with health and well-being of our staff specifically. This is about the wider social pressures caused by an ageing population that impacts on us, impacts on our partners, and it impacts on the county council as well. Flooding and severe weather we're all aware of. Pandemic flu has always been on our risk register, but what we have done with pandemic flu is we have added to that an element including COVID. Obviously, this time last year, we didn't know what COVID was, and now we've been hit with a massive global change in how we look at this risk. So we have included pandemic flu and COVID, but the difference we're seeing with COVID around the pandemic flu risk, pandemic flu risk was based around staff shortage due to a large number of illnesses. What we found with COVID is staff shortage due to illness numbers has been almost non-existent. In fact, we've almost had more staff available to us during COVID than normal times. So what we have found is that the risk is associated with lockdown measures, new ways of working, restricted ways of working that have severely affected the way we deliver our key services, such as prevention visits, protection visits, training of our operational crews and so on. Non-domestic fires, obviously, we're aware of. Water risks, this is not necessarily flooding, this is looking at quite a high number of incidents that we face involving the waterways around the county. I'm sure we've all driven around some of the lanes and roads in the county, alongside dikes full of water, quite deep in some cases. We have had a significant number of incidents where people have left the road, entered those dikes, and it's created challenges for our water rescue crews and our operational crews. But we wanted to articulate that. Residential high-rise, always been a risk on our risk register, but we've actually added in there elements to do with the national review following Grenfell and how that's being rolled out across the country. A lot of focus by government on high-rise across the country. Lincolnshire, we've still got a relatively low number of high-rise, so we are well onto that. Malicious tax, heritage is one we've articulated as well. Again, we've always had quite detailed plans to deal with our big heritage risks, but what this is in conjunction with the consultation, we identified a larger number of lower level heritage risks, so we wanted to put that on our risk register as well. And obviously deliberate fires has always been around there, but it's relatively low on the list now. So I can come back to any questions on any of those particular risks moving forward, but what I will do is move on to the integrated risk management plan.
Okay.
And so the integrated risk management plan is a shorter document which in effect is summarising the outcomes of the consultation and the community risk profile. Just bear with me. So that is in page 120 in the pack. It outlines our vision, mission and service objectives, and also briefly covers culture and so on. So in effect, it's actually summarising the risks, what we're doing about it, and what we've also done there is put a one-page reference to the supporting frameworks, which is the P&P, resourcing, response, people and evaluation framework. And what that does is it outlines, for example, if you look at page 14, our ambitions. So they're high-level ambitions followed by more detailed objectives, and they are supported by a separate document, which is in effect a strategy, which are at the end of this document. So for prevention and protection, you will see our ambitions to have zero accidental fire deaths in the county, aim to ensure we attend calls where actually needed and reducing false alarms, and aim to provide support and advice to partners. It goes into a lot of detail there, but I didn't want to dwell on each of those due to the time involved today. So similar response to similar approach to response and people. And sorry, we've got a postman knocking at the door. And the evaluation framework as well. The evaluation framework is in effect looking at how we test and review and basically scrutinise the actual work we're doing. And also, overall, it's underpinned by our people framework as well, which is looking at how we develop, protect our staff, develop our staff, train our staff, and also build culture within the fire and rescue service. So that's the integrated risk management plan. The suite of documents below that are the detailed detailed frameworks, which I briefly covered, but I didn't want to dwell on those today to give you the opportunity to ask questions. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the community risk profile and integrated risk management plan, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you, Councillor Pepper. So you report on the scrutiny comments, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader, for allowing me to speak there. Yeah, the committee was overall pleased with the report. and appreciate all the work that's been put into it. If I could just get you to turn to pages 39 and 40 of your agenda, you'll see that the Public Protection Committee had additional comments for consideration. There's 6 bullet points there. I'd just like to go through those briefly if I could.
Certainly.
The first bullet point, the committee was disappointed with the response rate. Just to say, the consultation ran for 14 weeks, ending on the 31st of March, with a total of 172 responses, mainly through an online link to a SNAP survey, plus emails, plus hard copies was available. 172 responses out of a population of what, 700 odd thousand in Lincolnshire seems very little to the committee, and it may be that our fire and rescue does not attract controversy and little interest from the public to participate. But I think in future we need to promote the consultation better by, I don't know, maybe social media or whatever, advertise it some way better than we probably did. The second bullet point, the committee queried why the population figures for Lincoln didn't include the student population. It was by scrutinising that the committee realised that the student population wasn't included in the report. It was felt at the very least that there should be a mention in the document to say that Lincoln has a certain amount of students, which fluctuates in numbers throughout the year. The third bullet point, the committee identified a number of trends in the statistics. The Public Protection Committee were aware that numerous dwelling fires had been caused by illegal cigarettes. One in my mind in particular at Spalding resulted in a fatality. There is an illegal brand called Ginlings, which we've probably all heard before, which, unlike legal cigarettes, continue to burn when left unattended. Our committee were a little surprised that there was no mention in the document of fire and rescue working with our trading standards to try and stop the distribution of these cigarettes. Just briefly carrying on, the fourth bullet point, which is page 70 of the report and also page 112 of the agenda pack. The committee highlighted some of the very rural areas in the county. The IRMP showed a map of the county with 10, 15 and 20-minute response times. In brief, areas in green, the fire and rescue were able to respond in 10 minutes, areas in yellow to respond in 15 minutes, and areas in orange to be able to attend in 20 minutes. What caught the committee's attention was the fact there were some remote areas that were white on the map. With no explanation to that, it means that Lincolnshire Fire and Rescue would be unable to attend in 20 minutes. The fire officer giving the presentation somewhat had to be prompted to say that those areas close to the county boundaries, such as Cams, Notts, Norfolk, Humberside, would be called in to attend to those incidents. And we maybe thought that deserved a mention in the document. The fifth bullet point, our committee explored the procedures in place for bullying. That certainly captured the committee's attention, and it was felt maybe this was one for the portfolio holder to look into a little deeper. And finally, the sixth bullet point, the committee welcomed the proposal of a yearly review of the IRMP and for it to go through the scrutiny process on a yearly basis. Thank you for allowing me the time, Leader.
Thank you for that, Nigel. So can we just run through either Nick or Les in response to some of those? I suppose the first issue was about the low response rates and what comments you've got. I mean, I would say on that there is certainly a vast improvement in terms of the presentation, particularly on the community risk profile, but it is a heap of confusing document. I mean, I don't know how much of this is actually prescribed how it should be the format, but obviously we are going to hopefully agree to put this out for to publish it. But if you're a member of the public, trying to wade through all this lot is quite confusing. And I just wonder, is there any more work we could do in terms of when we do go out to consultation, we can simplify it so that people can see the wood for the trees, because it is quite a massive data. So I don't know whether Les or Nick wants to answer that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Nick, would you like me to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I do appreciate there is a lot of documentation there.
And it's all in different, you know, this this bit and that bit and the other bit. And, you know, and all people really want to know is, are we safe and what are you doing about it?
Yeah,
really.
Absolutely. I mean, the community risk profile is probably not really a document. It's obviously something we've got to consult on. And I think there was a simplified version that went out during the consultation as well to sort of articulate some of these things. One of the feedbacks we got during the initial consultation was because we were sending out a simplified document, there wasn't enough detail for people to comment on. So some of our partners wanted the more detailed documentation in order to respond to it. So what we would do is we would, the public would really see the integrated risk management plan, which is a summation of the community risk profile. That's only a relatively short document, about 8 pages. The community risk profile is really there if they wanted to delve into a bit more detail, and particularly our partners might want to look at that, and that's what we've used for more detailed, in-depth consultation with partners. So it is a suite of documents. We recognise that there is a lot of detail in there. The number of responses traditionally is always been low in relation to integrated risk management plans. We did utilise social media and various other forms of engagement and work with the LCC engagement team. So it is an age-old problem. What we wanted to do moving forward in the annual reviews is actually give hard copies plus electronic links to the district councils as well, and sort of almost put them on their desk and sort of say, you know, we really do want your comments, and hopefully they will engage with their local communities as well. So take a much more proactive approach to the consultation engagement and asking people to comment on that. Unfortunately, we don't get many comments from the public. We tend to get most of our comments from our partners and representative bodies and staff bodies. But we have worked with various groups in the community to try and get representation of their view on risks.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, there is a difference between technical responses from partners to the public. Yeah. And I think the concern was, so hopefully, you know, in future we can sort of improve it so the public get, I mean, were the public, for example, asked some sort of key, just simple questions that, you know, bearing in mind most people haven't got the time to be wading through all the interest, frankly, just some simple questions about genuine choices, not about, you know, stuff that's going to happen anyway. Yep, I think we should look at that in the future.
Okay, yeah.
Right, the next one, I think it's a valid point about students. Well, I think I've heard there's about 18,000 students in Lincoln alone when the universities are fully open. It does seem a bit of an oversight, but and bearing in mind they're probably a higher risk in some degrees of with HMOs and all the rest of it, why it's not been addressed. So I don't know who's going to answer that.
I think probably Tim, I suspect, is probably the man to answer that one.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Councillor Worth. So you're absolutely right. It does deserve a mention in the document, and it'll certainly make an entry in the review that we do. Just to I guess assure councillors that there is work being undertaken with the student population in Lincoln. The Prevention and Protection Department have an agreement with the student board to make sure that they're looking at the specific accommodation in Lincoln on top of their normal work. So there is work being undertaken, and you're absolutely right. It's an omission from the report, which will be rectified in the next iteration.
So what actually will happen in terms of preventative measures for students, you know, who are probably the first time from home, living in HMOs, etc., probably not the most risk-aware slice of the population. Is there what work is being done to actually help make students aware, for example, of some of the issues they should be addressing?
So there are risk visits that are occurring with the various buildings within Lincoln, and it's I haven't got the full detail, Council, unfortunately, in front of me. But
is there a partnership program with the university to, you know, as part of what they do with freshers in particular, but also other students, that sort of information campaign?
There is an agreement in place. I understand that during the pandemic there has been some issues with that agreement, but I know there is an agreement in place.
Well, appreciate an agreement, but what's actually happening is probably more relevant, isn't it?
It is. You're absolutely right, Councillor.
I think it's something. It needs more than it needs to be in the report, but I think what would be better is there is an action plan and some assurance that stuff is actually happening, apart from just on. I'm not saying it is just on paper. I'm just saying reassurance that we know what's going on. I have a hand up. Not sure who it is. Is it Councillor Woolley?
Yes, I've certainly got my hand up, Leader. Couple of questions, and I'll sort of turn this round a little, Les, if I may. I too am disappointed with the consultation response, and equally so around the going out wider to district councils. I'm surprised that it didn't happen in the first instance, but I think that's an issue for me to take away to discuss with the engagement team. But what reasoning did they give you for such a low response rate? First of all, I've got another question, but that one first.
Yeah. Well, the consultation did go out quite wide to districts and parish. I think it's the comment I made earlier about sending it out sometimes isn't enough. You've almost got to knock on their door and, you know, not go away until you've got an answer. And I think we've probably got to take that approach and be a bit more proactive in sort of really chipping them up for a reply.
Can you just tell me if you is that the engagement team weren't proactive enough, or do you feel that your colleagues, you know, from the fire entity itself, probably need to be a bit more proactive?
I think what it is obviously there's a massive, we couldn't knock on everybody's door, but key partners such as the district councils and so on, and maybe even the parish councils, we probably, it's a reasonable number of people that we can actually take that more proactive approach. And whether it's through a hard copy and a letter or a follow-up phone call, we probably need to target the people that we do want a response from. And unfortunately, I think trying to get responses from people on consultation is quite difficult, particularly when there's a lot going around. But we do need their views, so I think it's important to get those views.
And again, can you just reassure me, I noticed that the consultation period ended in March, really barely before COVID had begun. Do you feel that the consultation with the public is still fit for purpose, still relevant, or perhaps that more work should be done now to just get an updated view from the public?
Well, what we did is we took the period during COVID to take on board some of the comments and actually strengthen the work, particularly around the frameworks. Yes, it's quite a long process, obviously. We could certainly look at a reviewed consultation. I don't think it would dramatically change the community risks. In fact, there's very little change between the community risks between the previous RMP and this one. It's just slightly clearer articulation of the risks. But yeah, in some of the reviews, perhaps not on an annual basis because of the time taken, but we could look at mini consultations and perhaps in midterm look at a longer consultation, maybe after the second year or before the third year, if you see what I mean, but with a mini consultation in between.
And very finally, if I may, if you go to page 237, and I will pause while everybody scrolls through, it's beyond Appendix H is all I can tell you, but page 237. If you, Les, tell me when you've got there, and then
Get it on page 237. Yes, is that page 5?
Page 237 of the agenda.
Yes, that's page 5 of the. It's like a blank form, pro forma, yeah.
Yes. So if you look at those questions, well, certainly question 3 and 4. What are we referring to? Because, you know, you're asking a question on something that it's, well, where do you find those pieces of information in the first instance? I just do not understand the questions.
Yeah,
I don't know how to answer them.
This is just an indication of what the consultation form was like in terms of response. There was a document that went out with it, basically listing those risks. So there was a document and you were asked to respond to the information in that document.
But that document is not included in these documents.
Tim, I don't know if you could. I know you weren't in.
So absolutely. The consultation went out with the community risk profile and the IRMP. So those were included with this pack for the questions. So the questions, although it's excellent feedback, again, I think you're absolutely right, they could be clearer, but the questions related to the risks within the community risk profile that was sent out. As a direct result of that consultation, that was the main reason that we added the framework detail into the pack within that period of consultation and extended the consultation, because there are a number of responses that asked us for more detail around what our aims and ambitions were in terms of responding to the risks within the community risk profile. So I guess feeding back partially to the question that came earlier on about the difficulty we have communicating clearly with the public with such a massive information, and I do recognise there are an awful lot of information within these documents. I think there's two things to take out from the process that we've just been through. One is that we need to be extremely clear about that front-facing page of IRMP, and make sure that there's no confusion for members of the public. And secondly, then we need to work a little bit harder on making sure that there's no ambiguity in some of the questions that are provided. So it's been really good feedback, and I'd just like to reflect, if I can, Councillor, on the fact that this is a new iteration of a suite of documents, and as such, it's not a fait accompli. It's not the final position of these documents. We do aim to review them in detail throughout the period of the RMP.
Thank you for that. So if we could go back then to the scrutiny comments, I think most of the rest were sort of noting or identifying. There was the issue, and I'm not quite sure was what Councillor Pepper said, were scrutiny reassured by the issue about support available to members of staff with issues they might have? Has that been satisfactorily resolved, or is there more work to be done?
Can I maybe come on?
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. Yes, I think I wouldn't like to see that blown out of proportion, because it's more about an issue that people feel able to find the right line of reporting so they can go through the system and speak to the people they need to speak to if they're feeling any issues, whether it's mental health or bullying or harassment, whatever it might be. They just want those lines of communication so that they're easy and they feel able to do that. And those positions are in place. And I know from some of the things that I've seen that all those policies are there. So I'm quite confident that we're in a good place for that. But it is an area we'll keep an eye on regularly, because the welfare of our staff is obviously very important to us.
Thank you for that. Comment I've got in terms of one of the risks was just specifying flu or indeed now coronavirus. Would it not be better to just have because obviously what we're learning is that there will be other pandemics of which we probably don't know yet. Would it not be better just to say any bacterial, viral pandemic or whatever? Because I think there needs flexibility in terms of whatever comes next. In terms of that sort of thing will probably be different and will probably require a different response. I think one of the lessons of coronavirus is that I think everybody who was trying to fight the last battle, the last war, which was flu pandemic, when obviously probably a different strategy was required for coronavirus. So I would suggest that is broadened to a broader outlook, because we are talking 4 years hence. In terms of the only other thing, so I think we just need to look at that. Obviously, am I correct in saying the overall profile of fires is still declining, or is that correct? Trying to work through all the figures. And obviously, in terms of road traffic RTAs, that is being looked at elsewhere, as from a county council point of view, in terms of how we can address those issues as well. So could I just have an answer on those two, please?
Yes, I mean, overall the profile of fire incidents is on the decline. There are certain areas, both nationally and locally, where we're seeing either plateauing or slight upturns in certain areas, particularly sort of malicious fires in some cases, but it tends to be localised, and the data is quite small in terms of numbers, so therefore small changes make a big forgive me, Councillor, I forgot the
The
second.
pandemic, as well, the more
yes,
general definition of a not trying to specify a particular. With that, and whether Derek's on.
Yes, that's noted. I think we did reflect COVID in that COVID created a different risk for us in terms of it wasn't a risk due to staff shortage, but it was a risk down to restricted ways of working in lockdown. So pandemic flu is part of a national set of risks as well. So we've incorporated that. Maybe the way we explain it, although it's down as pandemic flu, I think make it clearer this involves any mass illness involving the public that affects the way we deliver our services.
So it probably just needs a different terminology then, which I'm sure that somebody else can come up with.
Yeah.
Right, and in terms of obviously the road traffic, that is being addressed or trying to address it elsewhere, and again is an ongoing issue which we continue to grapple with.
Yeah, that's a constant approach from our prevention team, and obviously we're part of the Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership as well that looks at behaviours as well as engineering changes to road safety.
Okay, thank you. So any other contributions, please? Yes, I have Councillor Davey. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'll try and keep my contribution brief on this. Firstly, I was interested in the failure to count students in Lincoln, which I suspect is probably around 20,000 when you take the university, BGU, and those people studying at Lincoln College who stay in Lincoln during the course of their studies. So I just want to ask a question really about the coast. In the community register, we talk about 220,000 people living in the Links coastal zone, potentially impacted by catastrophic flooding. As you'll know, Les, a few years ago we did an overfly of the coast in the winter months, which identified thousands of people living in caravans along the coastline, which weren't counted in official figures. So I want to know whether that 220,000 includes those, or you've made any estimation of those in this. And obviously you'll be aware, since this report was written, that East Lindsey District Council have brought in what's called a local development order, which means that caravan sites in the coastal zone will be open all year round. There's no quantifiable number of how many sites will take that up or how many vans will be involved. But if we had a quarter of the caravans on the coast filled with people in the winter months, or particularly in that Christmas period, and we had a worst case scenario storm, you're going to be looking at probably another 40, 50,000 people on that number to potentially evacuate. So what will need to be done to ensure a safe evacuation and safe management by yourselves and the rest of the LRF team going forward? And since the decision to proceed with putting more people into a high-risk area and a high risk for Lincolnshire, who's going to pick up the cost of it all? Thanks, Les.
Okay.
Thank you.
Question regarding costs, obviously, probably not one I can answer, but yes, it is a risk. Unfortunately, flooding is becoming far too common far too common an issue now in our weather patterns. Obviously, we've seen our response to places like Wainfleet. Across the county, our crews are trained and equipped both with pumps and their own personal safety equipment to respond to flooding. Just to give you an idea, all our vehicles have submersible pumps on them, what they call light portable pumps, and also the major pumps. We also have mobile pumps called Betsy pumps, which we've ordered another couple as well. And they are far more mobile. They can be put in place and free up a fire engine and the crew because they can be left and monitored by smaller numbers. In addition, we have access to national assets through the National Resilience Team. So that allows us to access boat teams and train crews from across the country. We both support that and call on that when necessary. But one of the biggest things, obviously, we're involved with the LRF partners. So we have link into MACA arrangements, which is involving or requesting military support, which we saw in Wainfleet last year. So we've got a very deep and wide integrated ability to respond to flood risks. In addition to that, obviously, we do training and exercising with the LRF, and and Tim might be able to comment on this, we are reviewing our East Coast Inundation Plan, which looks at both how we can respond, but also how the risks have changed in terms of flooding risk. So, Tim, I don't know if you wanted to comment on the inundation plan.
Yeah, just briefly, if I can, Chair. It's a really key point actually, because the East Divisional Commander has a responsibility every year for reviewing a specific East Coast inundation plan, which, as the Chief rightly alluded to, includes links into the LRF and Emergency Planning Department, and looks specifically at our response to a wide-scale East Coast inundation in exactly the areas that Councillor Davey suggests may be an issue. So from an assurance perspective, absolutely all our firefighters are trained to work in still water. We've got a significant number, as you'll all know, of assets to enable us to do that, which we retain and train on regularly. And then on top of those, we've got the ability to work in swift water rescue through various teams throughout the county as well. So it's a well-practiced and well-rehearsed plan. And I know there is some work being undertaken this year. It's part of our service plan to look specifically at the review in the East Coast Inundation Plan, as we do every year.
So I think the question really was, in the light of potentially more mobile homes or whatever, or caravans being occupied longer in the year below sea level, most of them, presumably your plans will have to, whatever it was called, you just said, your local divisional commander plan will have to be addressed to deal with that, I'm assuming.
Yeah, absolutely right. And the East Coast Inundation Plan that we have includes thoughts around landing areas, and it works with other agencies to make sure that there's a number of integrated processes in place to evacuate large areas whenever that's needed. Clearly, when we get, for example, storm surges, it's very difficult to predict where any breach is likely to occur. So usually what happens is we build a few forward staging posts that are able to react to a breach anywhere along the coast, depending on where the information is coming through from the Environment Agency. And then we respond and alter our response in line with where those breaches occur if they do.
Can I just add?
Yes, Councillor Colin, thank you.
That I think that, Tim, the question for me is that this proposal to put more people into the coast is applicable from now, from this October, not next year, but from this October. Your report already identifies that stations at Boston, Mablethorpe and Skegness are at risk themselves and suggest business continuity measures. So what are the business continuity measures in relation to those assets that are at risk themselves?
So thank you for this good question. Thank you. So each station has its own individual business continuity plan, which includes a number of sites where both vehicle and equipment can be resited for a period of time. So, and as an example, the last time we had a storm surge, Mablethorpe absolutely followed its business continuity plans, had to vacate the station for a short period until the risk subsided. And again, when we had the events in Boston, the conversations were being had about whether we needed to move the assets at Boston Station away, as the water was obviously encroaching towards that area. Fortunately, it didn't get to that stage, but the business continuity plans had been invoked, and there are a number of different areas that we can relocate assets to if we need to.
Can I just add, that I just think that the business continuity plans are fine, but I want to be assured that the 1 in 200 year risk that we all know is the one we never want to see happen. But if it did take place, how really prepared are the fire service and the emergency services to manage it? And maybe is this not a piece of work for Nigel's committee to look at with the service in terms of looking at the whole risk around coastal inundation and the management of it?
I think that is a very fair comment. I think the other issue is we are talking about finite resources here, and obviously the difficult balancing out, trying to match risk with the resources available. So obviously if more resources, say, had to be made available to the East Coast, that probably means there'll be less resource elsewhere. So it is we've got to be realistic about what can be provided, which probably makes the job of the fire service a bit more difficult in terms of that difficult job of balancing risk against the resources. Fair comment?
I agree with you, Chair Leader, and I think it's probably a scrutiny piece of work that actually helps helps us inform that decision.
I think that would be useful. So I think Councillor Pepper is nodding. So it's something he probably just needs to look at, because we do know it will continue to be a constant worry. Although we've got away with it for many years now, we've got to be ready for the worst if hopefully it doesn't happen. Have I got anybody else who wishes to? Les, did you want to come back? Your hand is up. I'm not sure whether it's a legacy hand.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Chair. It's just to reassure councillors in terms of response resources. Yes, we have finite resources within Lincolnshire, but we support and are part of that national network. So, for example, if there was East Coast flooding, perhaps involving other partners as well, we could say that they're going to need resources as well, which is true. But bear in mind, we have partners across the whole UK that can come and support. And this has been tried and tested on a number of occasions nationally and been seen to be very effective. It's probably the envy of the world, the national resilience facilities we have, as well as that very well established, tried and tested links with the military as well. So in terms of resources to support it in responding, they're significant and be tested and been seen.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Just on one sort of general point, obviously we've all been watching the inquiry into the Manchester bombings, and obviously heavy criticism of Greater Manchester Fire Service. Can you just reassure us that I know it's a very difficult judgment has to be made, that obviously that we wouldn't be put in such a position if God forbid anything like that happened in Lincolnshire.
No, absolutely not. The report on the Manchester bombing, when you look through it, as always, these things are breakdown in communication, and it's to do with the way the procedures have been developed for terrorist incidents involving warm zones and hot zones. So in effect, I think there was a breakdown in communication between control rooms, and the fire service control room were in effect not really aware that anything significant was happening whilst on scene. Ambulance and police were there. So yeah, there's a lot of lessons learned. I think the fire service are smarting from that and recognise that there were some serious breakdowns in communications.
Well, I'm interested really in Lincolnshire. I mean, it does help. You are co-located with the police. So, but I think that you're saying that was a breakdown between the various agencies, which left people without professional help because people didn't realise that. So what I'm interested in Lincolnshire, I think that's what we really want to hear about, is in Lincolnshire, are we very confident that wouldn't happen here?
Yes, basically the relationships in Lincolnshire, I think, are much more joined up, much more embedded. So first name terms between the services. So those communications would take place much earlier, and we wouldn't be in a situation where we were sitting not informed of such a major incident.
Okay, I think that's Councillor Worth. Did you want to add anything to that? I think I'm reassured on that. But
yeah, no, I'm quite assured on that. I think particularly since we've moved to joint control room, joint headquarters, the relationships between fire service and police and ambulance, particularly having the joint facility down at South Park, have made a massive improvement. And as Les has said, the kind of individual relationships are equally important in that. And I've certainly got full confidence that the communications between all three are as good as anywhere. So I don't have a problem with that. I was just going to pick up on something that Councillor Davey said earlier around students in Lincoln. Just wanted to make a point that it's not that we haven't considered the students in Lincoln. We have considered the students in Lincoln, but the issue for fire and rescue was more around you had to be careful you didn't have a disproportionate response to the times when they're not there as opposed to when they are there. So just wanted to make that clear. I'm not, we haven't forgotten about the students. They're very much in our thinking at Lincoln.
Thank you. Well, I think that just we'll need sort of expressing in the documents, won't it? Okay, has anybody else got any further comments, questions they'd like to make? Right, so there are two recommendations. So one is that we approve the IRMP and also then the publication. There are some, I think, some tweaking required. So I think what needs to happen is, subject to some reflection of the comments that have been made, we probably do need. So I would suggest that before it goes out, those adjustments are made. Like, for example, this addressing the addressing the student issues and other issues. So could that be done? And then if the executive are comfortable, then it will be given to me and Councillor Worth just to agree those before it's finalised. Would that seem the right way forward?
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
We're happy with that then.
Yes.
So
Yes.
we'll move to the vote then. So if everybody who is not a councillor, please remove themselves from the screen. So all those in favour of those two recommendations, please now show. Yes, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. So thank you, Les, for that, and for Tim. Thank you. And we'll now move on to the next paper, which is performance reporting against the council business plan Q4. James Drury, please.
Good afternoon, Leader. Good morning, Leader. Sorry, apologies. Good morning, Leader. Thank you. Yes, this is the standard performance report for the final quarter of the financial year 1920, and therefore covers the period from January to March 2020. And it measures and demonstrates our performance against our business plan for last year, for the final quarter. It's a quarter that obviously had COVID impact towards the final part of that quarter, but overall the performance is positive, with increases in performance in a number of key areas. And I'll ask Jasmine to talk through the report and then obviously take any questions or comments from the executive. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, so as James has said, so this is the final report, and actually it's the final report against the council business plan before we move to our new performance framework. So overall, yes, performance was good. We actually had some a greater number of commissioning strategies performing really well compared to Q3, and the pandemic has had an impact on some areas of performance, and I've highlighted those in the report. So just moving on then to page 242 of the pack. Normally we would have reported Q4 performance to yourselves, to the executive in July, but obviously because of the pandemic, it was agreed to defer the report. So the majority of the measures that can be compared with the target actually did achieve the target. Just trying to navigate down paper. So there were 60 performance indicators that we can compare with the target, and 78% of those actually achieved the target. That's 47 indicators. There's 13 indicators that didn't achieve the target, and of those, there are 5 that had specific impact around the COVID-19 on their performance, and they're really around trading standards, visits to libraries, and jobs created, and also external funding that was tracked. I've just summarised the reasons for those on pages 242 and 243. So I think just interesting to note as well on point 2.4, a small number of measures that are reported with a lag. So there's a delay by which time that we can gather that performance information and report it. And those really around public health and juvenile reoffending. You'll notice that because that performance was prior to the pandemic starting, that hasn't affected the figures there in terms of performance for Q4. So point 2.5, executive may recall that there was an audit that was going to be undertaken for one of the adult care measures around concluded inquiries where the denied outcomes were achieved, just to actually understand much more, so the service could understand those small number of cases where the desired outcome wasn't achieved. But that ongoing audit was paused due to the onset of the pandemic. So they're expecting to be able to report that in Q1. There was a small number of measures where data wasn't available at the time the report was written, again due to the pandemic. And one of them is around adult social care, adults living with mental health problems, living independently. And that's because the LPFT, who provide us that information, have obviously, for obvious reasons, reprioritised their work due to the pandemic. And then the national audit returns for adult care were also given an extended deadline for those to be submitted, again due to the pandemic. And I think just to bear in mind, as always in Q4, the adult care data is provisional, and when that is finalised, we'll be able to update the performance information that's actually published on the website. And there's a link to that within the report. I think on point 2.8, just to mention that the fire and rescue, in terms of the data for that in the report, they can't say that it's 100% accurate, although there is a high level of confidence in that data. And that's really due to the current mobilising system and the East Coast Consortium Fire Rescue Control Services. So as always, I've highlighted the areas of good performance, and that's included in Appendix A of the report. And you can see in point 2.9, there is a number of those commissioning strategies that have performed well or really well. And then, as always, just for those areas where we haven't achieved the target, the details of those are included in Appendix B of the report. And then I'm happy to take any questions, and I believe that Councillor Parker will pick up on the scrutiny comments in the report, as scrutiny discussed the paper last week. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Thank you, Councillor Parker.
Thank you. Yes, we did discuss it, and our comments are on page 247. Just briefly to comment, the first point was we recognised and wanted to acknowledge the improvement in performance in relation to those targets, which achieved really well, up from 6 to 9 out of 17. We recognise, to be clear about it, that these figures are quite dated and have been overtaken by a lot of things, mainly and predominantly COVID, and that's affected the performance, as Jasmine said, of a number of our targets. Looking at the alcohol users that left specialist treatment, only briefly, to mention that this has been a regular theme of our OSMB meeting when we've had these figures. And although the measure is managed very closely, it's difficult to achieve that particular target. Trading standards did get a mention in two sorts of ways. It was suggested within the meeting that there was an opportunity maybe for trading standards to branch out into looking at unsafe trading practices in a different sort of way, such as overcrowding and people not observing social distancing or wearing masks. And at the same time, there was a brief mention of scams, and scams is trading standards, should we say core business, and the likelihood of scams has increased in relation to COVID, because people who are vulnerable can be exploited by people promising things that they're not going to deliver. Quarter four figures, as Jasmine said, it was noted that a number of them were not available, but we're going to have a look at them when we get the information available. So generally speaking, we did well, really well in 9 out of 17, but the whole area of the way that we look at it was dominated by COVID having an impact in many different ways. That's as much as I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, in terms of a couple of points you raised there, one's about scams, and again, that is a continuing priority, and we are looking at potentially having a review of community safety, how it's managed in partnership with the Police and Crime Commissioner. So I think, again, that will following that review, probably will be a change in probably targets, I hope, to reflect the new strategy, so to speak. I don't know, somebody just help me on, because obviously there is a continuing debate about, I was going to say enforcement, well, I suppose it is the right word, or enforcement advice about COVID regulations, and there's been talk of COVID marshals and all this sort of stuff, which does worry one slightly. So I don't know if anybody can help me with that in terms of what the latest information is. Is anybody out there to answer that question, please?
It's one that we raised in the meeting.
Yes,
and
I'm hoping for an officer to come back with an answer.
Yeah, I'll try and take some of that, leader, if that's okay. So yeah, it's still very much a moving feast, waiting for various bits of guidance to come back through from government. I think if members were content to receive back something in writing from us, I'd suggest that as a way, as and when things are resolved, that might be the best way to resolve that question, if you're content with that, leader.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's nationally, it is quite confusing about what is expected and who is going to be doing it. So, and I think some of the initial thoughts of the government, shall we say, in terms of COVID marshals have probably they've rode back from, but it is one of those issues where a bit more clarity would be much appreciated. But at this stage, Andrew, we have not got a load of COVID marshals being trained up as we speak, have we? We're just waiting for, and again, the police obviously are heavily involved with doing this. So I think we are very much in the advice and working with environmental health and more than in some instances trading standards. But the issue with actual legislation is not helpful either, because we have got no powers still. Andy, whether you can help us on this?
Yeah, thank you, leader. Just one issue that was highlighted to me yesterday by Sean West was that there is a £60 million pot of funding from the Home Office to actually be bid against. But to bid in against that, you would obviously have to identify some resources that you are wanting to actually add to the pot to. And obviously, I think the position that's been taken politically, unless there's a full recompense for costs associated with training up marshals and everything, it would be something that there would be a concern about. From the police perspective, is the marshals would need to be accompanied by designated officers, because they will not have a full range of enforcement powers. So it further dilutes the police capacity to do other things and stay on top of other levels of investigation and such like. So it's akin to the CPSOs, that they can't actually carry out the full range of duty. So that again creates a resource pressure if we went down that route.
Yeah, and we discussed this at the Local Authority Engagement Board, which is a partnership board looking at responding to COVID, and I think that's the case. And I think we are, carrying on with, which is a successful strategy of working with, particularly with providers. And I think with the very odd exception, I think most of the hospitality and people who are providing services to the public, nearly all of them are doing their best, and most of the issues which do occur in Lincolnshire are occurring outside of premises. And I think, Andy, that we're very confident that there is the odd exception which we might have to take an issue with, but the vast majority are doing their best to actually comply with the rules, and also suggest not get their clients, customers to do the same as well. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I believe that's a reasonable summary, and to say that we're highlighted through sort of engaging with people. There's sort of conversations taking place to try and advise them how to sharpen up their act, and that predominantly is being done through environmental health and trading standards officers, and again the sort of like CPSO sort of like capacity within the police, without sort of getting into the hard-handed approach.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I think a pretty good result. So anybody got any further questions, comments they wish to make? Okay, if not, can't see anything. So I'll move to recommendations. We've noted and considered. So do you accept the report? So All those in favour, please show now. Anybody against? No. Thank you very much. We now move on to the final paper, which is the new the proposed performance framework reporting. So James, that'll be you again, I'm assuming.
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. So this report, as Jasmine referred to in the last report, that was the last quarter of our council business plan reporting. You'll be aware that we've now introduced the corporate plan, and this report outlines the performance framework that's linked to that corporate plan, which will be the way of measuring our achievements against the objectives that we've set, and will hold us accountable to those objectives within the corporate plan. So again, I'll ask Jasmine to talk through the detail of that, please. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Thank you. So Executive approved a success framework back in May, and this builds on that success framework and takes it a little bit further and adds some more detail to it. So as James has said, we'll start reporting against this new performance framework when it's approved by the executive, and that'll start reporting against the corporate plan. And so that framework is detailed in appendices A, B and C to this report. So on page 260.1.12, so the framework will consist of performance indicators, so things that we can measure by numbers, and then key activities, more narrative things against which we'll assess progress. And those will be reported against these 4 ambitions that are in the council corporate plan now. And that's how they'll be organised. So the proposal is that that framework will consist of those corporate plan performance indicators and activities, and they'll be reported quarterly to the executive and to Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, and we're calling those Tier 1. And they mirror more or less what was in the success framework that came to executive in May. But what we've added onto that is this layer of service level performance indicators. And they're historically, most of those ones that are in the council business plan, having done some sort of sense checking around those. And they all get reported to the scrutiny committees, again, by exception on a quarterly basis. And they're what we're calling Tier 2. So in Appendix A, that diagram just summarises what I've explained there, and also explains that the council business plan will cease reporting that from quarter 4. So Tier 1 of the framework then is highlighted in Appendix B, and I'd just like to draw your attention to just a couple of changes to that framework. So on page 269, I'll just move down to it, there is a item there which was around reporting young people as achievement around apprenticeships. Now the proposal is, and this has been agreed by the portfolio holder, that is actually removed from that element of the success framework, because by keeping it in, we'd actually be duplicating something that we're already reporting in a numerical performance indicator around employment, education and training for young people. So that's why that proposal is to remove that from the framework. And then in addition to that, there is just a slight change again on page 269, and this is around the skills of the workforce. So the minor change there is we've actually highlighted that is, I'll just read what it is, make sure that we have the skills and expertise of our workers to be able to induct and support learning opportunities in an agile way. In the framework, you'll notice that's against the Place Directorate, it's a new activity, but actually the change is that actually sits within the Resources Directorate under the HR function. So they're just those 2 slight changes, but also on page 273, we're able to provide a little bit more detail on one of those performance indicators around highways. I'll just whiz down to page 273. And this is around the ambition creating thriving environments. And the performance indicator, it's bullet point 4, which just said at that time, condition of the carriageway reef surface. So the surface has been to have done some more work on that, discussed it with the portfolio holder, and we're actually going to be changing that performance indicator to a condition of classified road network, and that will be the A, B and C roads. And we're also adding in a new performance indicator, which is the condition of the unclassified road network. So at the time of putting this framework together in May, it was hoped that we could have one indicator that would assess the condition of the carriageway overall, but it turned out to be that's quite problematic, and therefore that's why these two measures have been proposed. So I'll just whiz back to the main body of the report.
Okay, is that it, Jasmine?
Yeah, that's it really. I mean, hopefully the report is self-explanatory. So we're going to be providing, as we say, those high-level measures. You'll have the addition of those narrative key activities. They'll get reported around a RAG rating, which the services will make a judgment call on. We've asked them for milestones, and then they'll be able to report progress against those milestones. So yeah, it was discussed at OSMB. So again, Councillor Parker, you have some comments from there.
Please, Councillor Parker.
Sure, yeah, fine. I think the 4 bullet points are identified on page 264, which we discussed at length. The 2 major ones were a recognition that whilst we have got key performance indicators, they are very much work in progress. The need for review was important, and as Jasmine has just indicated, a couple of reviews have already taken place. So in essence, we wanted to get across the point that the 4 key drivers, high aspirations, opportunity to enjoy life to the full, thriving environments and good value council services, would determine the performance indicators. And if we were not able, for example, particularly with high aspirations, to be able to qualify easily ways of measuring high aspirations, then we'd have to look at it again. As simple as that. We're not actually saying that that these are wrong at all. We're saying that these are the ones that fit the bill now. These performance indicators are about saying whether or not we're achieving what are our ambitions for Lincolnshire. We have approved completely the two-fold strategy of the executive and OSMB, looking at level 1 and the PI performance indicators at service level going to scrutiny committees, and there would be some interchangeability between the two. But this is a very good starting point, we acknowledged, as a way of starting off with our new corporate plan and holding to account service areas in relation to the delivery of the corporate plan.
Thank you for that, Councillor Parker. Any comments from Councillor Bradwell or Councillor Davis about those changes? They both would seem sensible.
No, Leader, I think they're fine. And actually, I think going through the new plan, actually, it just seemed a lot better. Going under the headings that it is going under now. So I think it will be a lot better when we go through the next few months and we're able to input information in there. So I welcome the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I think the key consideration is that it's important that the targets we set ourselves reflect how the people of the county and residents and taxpayers feel about the service we get. And I think the revised way we measure condition, I think, is important. That said, the only slight reservation I have is we need to make sure we don't take away the ability to compare ourselves both regionally and nationally, as well as being able to look internally, because it's very useful to benchmark how we perform, for example, within the highway service with other authorities. So I think we need to be cognizant of the national indicators as well. It's not helped by the fact that the Department for Transport are undergoing yet another review of how road condition is measured. Seemingly, it's only a matter of a couple of years since they did the last one. There's obviously not an awful lot going on down in Whitehall, so they've got lots of spare time.
Thank you. Jasmine, you wish to speak?
Yes, please. So just picking up on Councillor Davies' report, as a further sort of development through this, what we'll look at is all of those indicators that nationally we can compare and benchmark with, and then we'll produce a report to gather all of those together in a more meaningful way. So yeah, we'll be looking at that as we develop the framework.
That's good. Thank you for that. Good. Right. Any further comments, contributions? If not, I'll go to a vote again. So the recommendations are that we actually we do approve the corporate performance plan framework. we approve it, and then obviously then the reporting regime will get into full swing. But I think it's correct to say that first of all it will be it will have to be changed, not only because it's new, but also in the light of coronavirus and new ways of working. But at this stage, I think it's a good start. So could all those non-voting members remove themselves visually, and then we'll go to the final vote, please. So all those in favour of that recommendation on page 259, please show. All agreed. Thank you very much. That has been agreed again. There's no abstentions or against. So that has been passed and agreed. And with that, I'm correct in saying I believe that that does conclude the meeting. Thank you for your attendance, and have a busy rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader.